Okay, now we are on the class Hexapoda, which is more commonly known as insects. So class Insecta. And you probably have learned when you were a kid that insects had 6 legs. That's how you know they are an insect. So 6 legs, and they are on the thorax. So that middle body section, the thorax. And they have been around for a very long time. They first appeared on land about 400 million years ago. 400 million years ago. And we have good fossil records of flying insects from around 300 million years ago. So they were not, flight wasn't necessarily one of the first things to evolve in the insects, but it was a major aspect that made them successful. We'll see that in the next slide. So this is a fossil dragonfly. Okay, so what makes hexapods so successful, right? The beetles we know make up something like 22% of all named species, and insects in general are hugely diverse. So here's some hints on this slide, some images that might give you hints about what are some of the main things that make them so successful. So this first image here of all the dragonflies, insects evolved flight. And that's a great way to get away from predators. It's a great way to spread to new areas and colonize new areas that you could then have lots of babies that don't have to compete, right? And then this next image shows a grasshopper, and I picked that one because look at this hind leg here. It is huge, and it's modified for jumping. And insects in general have a great capacity for sort of evolutionary tinkering, right? Their bodies plans are very modifiable, and so they have evolved to occupy loads of different niches in their environment. So these are particularly good for jumping, but other legs of other insects are used for digging or grabbing on to, to hosts. And then a third thing is this complete metamorphosis. So as a beetle larvae will eat different food. A beetle larvae eats differently than the adult. Than the adult eats. And that's a big deal. So you can have larvae that eat food that is available in the spring, and then in the pupa maybe lasts through the summer, or the pupa might last over winter, and then the adult will emerge in the beginning of spring, lay new eggs. Maybe the larvae is out and about in early summer, and where there's lots of green growing, and so it's a very flexible kind of ecological niche. They can take advantage of when each food type is right. So maybe larvae eat vegetation, and the adults might eat insects or other kinds of things, fungi that only are around at a certain time of year. And then the pupa is kind of a resting stage that doesn't eat. So eats differently, doesn't eat. And then the adult eats something separate. So those are 3 things. And then again, the modifiable legs. Modified legs. And then flight. Those are 3 major things that insects have used to their advantage to become hugely diverse. There are 8 major orders of insects, and I wanted to include these because I love the names. I think names in biology, if they're any good, they tell you something about the animals. So Hymenoptera, and this is on page 5 of your notes. Hymenoptera means membrane wings, and the Hymenoptera include the ants and the bees and the wasps. And this is our box of one of our couple boxes that we have at the ARC collection of different Hymenoptera. And so that's that. Next group is the Diptera, and di means two. So by now you might have figured out that Ptera, the P is usually silent, but that ptera means wings. So two wings, meaning that most insects have four wings, but in Diptera, two of them have been modified into sort of steering halteres, and they're not really flight capable at all. So those include the flies, the mosquitoes, and the gnats, all those insects that we're not so thrilled at this time of year. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of mosquitoes in my backyard and a lot of flies coming out of my compost pile. Next up is Lepidoptera, and lepido means scaly. When you watch the video on the caterpillars, I think you'll be able to see and really fine detail some of the scales. If you've ever held a butterfly, if you're not careful, the scales will come off on your fingers if you've ever trapped a butterfly and held onto it. Best to just leave them be. Moths and butterflies are in this group, the Lepidoptera, this order. And here are some local butterflies and moths. This one is particularly fascinating, I think. It's called the pipevine swallowtail, and it's going to come up in one of the videos you'll see later. And then we've also got the monarchs and other like anise swallowtails, as well as a painted lady. Oh, these are gorgeous, and they fly through here sometimes every maybe 10 years. We get a huge migration of these painted lady butterflies. We had a huge migration about 2 or 3 years ago. These are sphinx moths over here, and they can actually look a lot like hummingbirds. Their bodies are really fat, and they hover while they feed. So those are the Lepidoptera. And Coleoptera, coleo means sheath. So these beetles, these are the beetles, and they have one set of wings that's membranous and one that is like a sheath, like a covering, a sort of a hardened protective layer. So in a sense, they really also, like the Diptera, they only really have two wings that are really used in flight. The sheath wings, they kind of hold out above them. You might see that in the video too. And then the Orthoptera, so ortho, if you go to the orthodontist, you're trying to straighten out your teeth. And so Orthoptera have straight wings. You can see the wings go back in a straight line. That's why they're talked about as the Orthoptera. That includes crickets, grasshoppers, and locusts. And then Odonata, which means born with teeth. These are the dragonflies and damselflies, and you'll see on the video that you're going to watch just how terrifying their jaws are if you are a small aquatic invertebrate. The next major order of insects are the Homoptera, meaning same wings. And those include the aphids, the cicadas, tree hoppers, and leaf hoppers. And this is a cicada here. You hear them more often than you see them. They make a kind of a constant chirring sound in summer evenings. Big, big eyes and kind of a glassy wing, I think. And then Hemiptera, meaning half wings. These include what we call the true bugs, back swimmers, which you'll see in ponds, and the water striders, which you've probably all seen walking on the surface of the water. And their feet are so spread out that they can sort of use the surface tension of the water to not sink. These are box elder bugs, and you can see when they say half wings, they mean basically half of the top wing is sort of sheath-like and half is membranous. And so it's sort of like this cross. You can tell these because they'll have a sort of a cross shape in their bodies. So those are the Hemiptera. And next up is all of the videos. There's 5 of them that I wanted you to watch on these hexapods. The first 2 are Hymenoptera, then the caterpillars is a Lepidoptera, Coleoptera, and Odonata. And so you can fill that in on your notes there. But enjoy these videos, and when you've answered all the questions that are on pages, well, mostly page 6, I think. Yeah, page 6 and 7, the first top part of 7, we will rejoin to talk about mollusks.